Hi, folks. Good evening. Hope you all been having a fantastic weekend. You're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. And today we're going to be talking about education. Education is the primary driver of any economy, and everybody has seen the effects that it has, especially on the African continent of not, having the right type of education, especially when it comes to vocational education. The African continent has been very focused on formal education. Why are we not looking at, vocational education? The rise of China, as we know it today, it's all about vocational education. So today we have two fantastic guests on the show, both of them educationists, long-standing educationists, one in the formal sector and one in the vocational sector. And they are here to have a discussion with us on, the benefits, the challenges of formal and vocational education, how we can tap into it, what is going on in those sectors, and how, we can leverage on it so that we can drive the African continent forward. So first, I'm going to introduce from the formal educational sector. Her name is Abiola Raimi. She is a long-standing teacher, lover of children, and she's here with us today. Hello, Abiola Raimi. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Nice to be on the show.
It's great to have you. Also, we're going to introduce the innovator from the vocational sector. She has done quite a lot in the vocational sector, especially in Nigeria, trained several people successfully and has a very, very high success rate. And her name is Omowale Ogunrinde. Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the program.
You're always welcome. We hope we'll have you plenty times on the show so that you could tell people, how to improve on their lives, because that's what vocational education does, in my opinion. So we'll start with you. Vocational education. A lot of people have quite a lot of misconceptions about vocational education. People think it is about becoming a tailor and all this kind of stuff. And we've seen that quite a few people, have modernized, especially terms that are being used. So instead of calling themselves tailors, they say they are fashion designers, that kind of stuff. So what can you tell us about vocational education in Nigeria?
I think vocational education in Nigeria just helps people to improve upon their formal education. I actually believe that vocational education in Nigeria is a bit different from what is practiced in most developed nations, because in a lot of developed nations, vocational education is actually an integral part of formal education. For example, an average Nigerian student who graduates as an engineer, maybe an electrical engineer in a Nigerian university, is actually not able to do a lot of practical work and finds himself suddenly not employable in industry. But that is not the case in developed nations, because in developed nations, the practical content is a necessary part of the theoretical content. And that is why vocational education in Nigeria is still a lot different from what is happening abroad. And so here in Nigeria, for most people who already have the formal education, who have gone to university and other higher institutions, they suddenly find themselves becoming unemployable. And so they need to acquire practical skills and practical certification to add up to what they already have and be able to get jobs. On the other hand, you have those who have not had the opportunity for the higher education or more formal education, becoming totally unemployable and not useful to themselves or to the society. And those are also people who want the vocational skills to be able to probably set up jobs, businesses for themselves. So vocational education here in Nigeria provides two various platforms to create employment, either for you to become employable in industry or for you to be able to set up a business of your own.
Okay. So for vocational education, there are quite a few people who have felt that there hasn't been enough said about it in terms of awareness. A lot of people go and get this formal education, but the formal education just does not put you in the frame of mind to be able to set up something, because you actually don't have the actual skills. What you have is the managerial skills, because a lot of people just do not understand that going to universities is all about managerial skills, more or less, or you being able to set up a business and running it as an entrepreneur, rather than you being able to be hands-on in the business.
Okay, is that question still for me?
Yes, it's still for you.
Yes, that's why I said I believe it's a bit different abroad, because hardly would you find somebody graduating from a good university in the UK or in the US or in India or even anywhere else in the developed nation with a BSc engineering that will be unemployable. It's not possible. They are not going to teach all theory without you understanding the why, and the why behind the theory is the practical part of it. So I want us to look at it. I'm looking at it in the content of Nigeria. In Nigeria, it is totally different. So here in Nigeria, you are taught the theoretical skills. And the theoretical skills will not even help you to manage a business, because you don't even know the why behind what you are doing. And that is why for most of our technical courses, the mechanical courses that we do in our vocational institution, the electrical engineering courses we do, most of our students are university graduates who either are looking for jobs in industry or want to set up businesses of their own. But because of the kind of quality of education they have had in the formal sector, it is not enough for them to do either. So they are not employable, and they are also not able to set up. They are not able, like you said, managerial. They are not even able to manage anything because they have not acquired the skills that are required. So if they come in for a certificate course, for example, in electrical installations, maybe domestic electrical installations, or industrial, or acquiring skills and solar tech, or refrigeration and things like that, then they are able to take a decision. Do I want to go and get a job in industry, or do I want to set up a business of my own? They now are able to make an informed decision. Unlike in the UK, when you graduate from a university with your BSc engineering, yes, there are other certification courses you have to take, but at that point in time, you are still employable as a management trainee, or you are able to get into industry. But here, it is not the case, because they have not been taught, they have not been prepared to either get into industry or to get into businesses of their own. So there is a lot of difference in the way vocational training is run here. And easily it can be integrated into the curriculum of higher institutions if there is the willingness on the part of stakeholders to do that. And that is what we have been clamoring for a very long time.
Okay, so Abiola, Raimi, in terms
Yes.
of the formal education sector, a lot of people have not, they've not been sensitized on how to run businesses. The educational sector, especially in Nigeria, it seems that they are not prepared, especially in terms of their curriculum, to groom people to be able to set up their own businesses, whether micro, small, or medium scale businesses. A lot of companies, when they employ, your fresh graduates, for instance, we always see that they have to retrain them consistently. Why do we have those challenges?
Okay, first of all, I need to say that one of the things that we must remember is that our educational system, as we practice it, the formal educational system is something that we've inherited from our colonial days. And what in those days, people were sent to school, they were having this education so that they could go into jobs where they would have people who were their managers. They were just to do the basically lower level work.
Employee mindset.
Yes. So the idea of it, it wasn't to make people entrepreneurs. It wasn't to make people able to do the work on their own. Because remember that the British system was very much based on a class structure. The they would say upper class, who were people who
Yes.
had money. They have money, they can fund organizations and things like that. Then you had the middle class. The middle class were people who were professionals. So yes, people who'd gone to university. And then you had the working class, which are exactly that. Working class meant to be working for salaries, right? So our education
95s,
system,
basically.
basically, or 9 to 5s, or four to midnight, or whatever.
For the
Basically,
all that, yeah.
yes. So that is the thing. We have to come up into the 21st century. And leading up to this time, for example, in Britain, the education system has been reviewed regularly. So there was a national curriculum way before, and then in 1988 there was a new national curriculum. That national curriculum was again a bit more of what we have, but making things like math more practical, because they realized that for people to understand it, they needed to be doing it. Now
Yes.
remember that in our system we have a thing where you learn formulas, you learn methods. People who don't clue into that are considered to be slow, are considered not to be as able as people who just get it just by hearing. The recognition that there are different types of learners. There are people who learn by looking. They are visual learners. There are people who learn just by hearing. They can listen and they understand. And there are people who need to be doing as you teach them, kinesthetic learners, so that they understand. The old system was based for visual learners, or sometimes auditory learners, and that was it. So moving into modern times, education has become something where you take all those things into consideration. You take into consideration just how different people learn, and you incorporate that. I mean, teachers will be aware of the need to you have all those aspects in your learning, and this goes right up on into further education, so higher education, further education, where a good teacher incorporates different methods, different um, practices into the teaching and learning process. Right. So with that said and done, in the UK, for example, say where even I mean, like I think good schools in Nigeria, and unfortunately, or schools which are that are in touch with modern ways will
Yes.
be incorporating practicals into what they do. So in the old days, things like chemistry, you had your chemistry practical in the lab. You did the titrations, things like that, but nobody really told you what that was for. All you knew was that you were doing a task for your lecturer, your supervisor, whatever. You were doing that, and that was it. Nobody actually told you and gave you a real life scenario in which you could use those things. Now,
Yes.
in more developed, I hate to say that more developed, but in other places, okay, let's talk about Britain, because as I said, our education system was based on what the British wanted the the people at the bottom to do, right?
Yes. True.
So the thing though now is that with all this recognition and all that, there's more practicals in the teaching and learning process. But more than that, in 1997, when the Labour government came in, we had a review of the curriculum again. And what then happened was that you then had more practicals. We then went on to when schools were teaching entrepreneurship. I mean, one of the most enjoyable entrepreneurship activities I did, okay, I'll tell you two, was with 7 and 8-year-olds. And what did we do? We set aside time in the week to bake cookies. We baked
All right.
cookies,
Okay.
we packed them up, we sold them, we reinvested that money, and so on. And in the end, the school gave us £25, and at the end of it, we had something like £237. We were able to pay the school back their £25, and then to buy things that we wanted for our class with the remaining money. So that was an incentive for the children, but it also introduced them to the idea that you could be an entrepreneur. You
So,
could
from
set
what
up
you're
some
saying,
sort of business.
here, Omowale Ogunrinde, why can we not introduce some sort of vocational education into the educational system from a very young age? When I was in school back in Nigeria, way back then, we had home economics classes, we had Greek, we had woodwork, but that does not seem to have transcended into anything. It does not come out in any way, especially amongst people of my generation. None of them has actually said, what I learned from secondary school is what has led me to some form of vocational training and then being able to set up a business. What most of them are doing right now is they are picking up after the fact. So they are out of a business, or maybe they're out of the banks they were working in and stuff like that. And they're now saying, okay, I need to set up something. They're now seeing that there are a lot of vocations where they do not have managerial skills. So there's a gap. So they fill in that gap as the middlemen, not the actual vocational skills, that they can use for themselves. Why can't we put that into our educational system right from when kids are 5, 6, 7, 8, like in the UK?
Okay, well, goes back to my last statement that stakeholders need to be committed and interested in bringing that change to happen. Quite a number of the private schools have introduced clubs and various things that their children can do to encourage
Yes.
them. But the focus is always there are no jobs out there. So you need to acquire the skills. And I think that is actually a wrong model. Let's take the example Abiola gave of teaching the primary school children how to make cookies, how to make money from it, how to invest the money, and
Yes.
how to make returns from it. And probably if it had not been a school setting, they would have actually showed them how they could probably divide their profits into two, invest some in stocks and shares, invest the
Yeah.
other in the needs and all of that. And that just drives a message home. And when I started vocational training education in Nigeria, what I did was I started in the church. And from the very first class, we got young teenagers who suddenly realized that, wow, so I can make money from this, but I need to understand even how to manage the money. So it's not just about teaching the children the skills to rear chickens or to bake or whatever, but
Yeah.
even actually teaching them the basic business skills that can help them to turn that skill into an enterprise. And
Yes.
that is the level schools need to go to. I don't know if either of you remember the school called Taye Sholari. It used to be a secondary school and
Oh,
it is
yes.
now a university. But
And
as
it can.
far back as in the 70s when we were in secondary school, Tai Sholari was already teaching those skills in his secondary school so that anybody who graduated from secondary school could decide whether they wanted to go on to university or they wanted to develop the skills they had into a business. And that is where apprenticeship, as you have it in Europe, comes to bear. You graduate from the secondary school knowing that I want to work as a mechanical technician or something like that. And you go on to do an apprenticeship course or you go on to do certificate courses and learn on the job, and then you are able to. I'll give an example that it's not funny, it wasn't nice when it was said, but I've never forgotten. The day my daughter graduated from medical school in the United Kingdom, as we were all out there taking pictures, a drunkard was passing, and he, of course, he tried to put a bubble, into the whatever.
Yeah.
And he said something. He said, "Why are you all excited? Even the plumber earns much more than medical doctors."
That's a
And
fact.
so people,
At this point.
exactly, that's a fact. Many parents were not happy. But I understood, because of what I do, I understood what he was talking about. Because there are some of these skills that are daily needs. And so, but then you can't just be a plumber. You can't just be a successful plumber because you know how to block a leakage or whatever. You have to
Yes.
acquire professional skills to be able to succeed as a plumber. And that is what is missing in this part of the world. Vocational training and vocational education is not for dropouts. It is actually skills that are specialized, that you can make money from, and that can help you to walk tall in the society. So we need stakeholders to understand this. We need other educators to understand this. We need the government to understand this. And as they introduce it into more schools and into the educational curriculum, they should introduce it at that level that helps it to gain respect.
So way back, say about 18 years ago, I was looking for something to do. I had a business, the business failed. And in the course of trying to figure out what to do, I sat in a meeting one day, and the people at the meeting were discussing furniture.
Seems they've lost me.
No, we can hear you. The people were discussing furniture, and can you hear me? Are you there?
She's frozen. Yeah.
Okay. So
Can you
back to
hear
what
us?
I say. So can you hear us, Omowale? I think she's lost us for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll put her back in the
Right.
stream. So anyways, back to what I was saying. So I was looking for something to
Right.
do. And in the course of that, discussing, they were talking furniture. They now needed somebody, to do some raw iron work for them. And I said, you know what, I can do this. What does it take? It's a case of managerial skills. I can set up a team to actually do that.
Mhm.
So now in the African, particularly Nigeria, in the school curriculum, one thing that is missing is the fact that everybody keeps pointing fingers at the other. It's either people are saying the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Isn't this supposed to be something that parents themselves look at from the early days and say, you know what, this is what's going on in the world. You must be able to do something with your own hands for you to be successful in life. Why is there that gap and miscommunication between parents, the educational sector, and the children? Abiola?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have seen, well, it's certainly in the UK, we had an advertisement. I think it's probably the HSBC advertisement, where they had a little girl. They had different businesses around the world, and a little girl selling lemonade. Can you hear me?
Yes, the 8-year-old girl, I think she was 8 years old.
Yeah, selling lemonade. So the
Yes.
thing about it is that, you see, like in the United States, for example, there's the culture of that lemonade sales.
Okay.
The children can make lemonade, put a table out, and people will pass and buy the lemonade. So that is a way of children learning that they can recycle their pocket money. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, my nephew, who's, how old is he now? 28 almost. But he, as a 2-year-old, used to do finger painting on the back of old calendars and sell it to us, his aunties, for 2 naira. In those days, we had the coins. So he would sell it to us for 2 naira. He said, oh, this is a nice painting. We used to flatter him. How much is it? He'll tell you 2 naira. And he wanted his 2 naira. There's a recent story of a lady whose grandniece, they were at a party in their home, having an event. And the little girl would come to the adults and say, oh, would you like so and so? Oh, yes, please. Thinking, oh, she's being so nice, She would go and get it for them and say, okay, that's £5, please. So
yes.
certainly a child like that, she understands how it is that you can turn something you're doing into money.
Yes. Hello?
But I want us talking about vocation. Yeah.
Yes,
Can
go
you hear
ahead.
me?
So, yes, we can hear you now. We lost you for a second there, but you're back.
Okay. So vocational education is yes, it is practical, isn't it? It's what you can do to and produce something or do something with your hands, or do something yourself. It's something that it helps you create a product that you are in control of, and that you can or a service that you can deliver, right, in
Yes.
exchange for money. The difficulty, as I said before, with our education system in Nigeria particularly, is that we are not keeping up with the modern times. We are giving people an education for a scenario that is no longer modern. In the 21st century, you need to be able to even be self-sufficient, to manage others yourself, to create products, rather than just being given the instruction on what to do. You need to be able to think outside the box. You need to be able to make links. And these are the things that must be included in any good formal education setting. Because as Wale said, the formal education setting is something that feeds or feeds into people who are doing a vocational training, and we must teach these side by side. So it's not one and then the other, and it is not one or the other. Because again, okay, if you think of the old apprenticeships, you work under a master, you work under people, you learn your craft, but you only graduate when you are able to incorporate everything you've learned and
Yes.
produce something, or solve a problem, or design your own, that sort of thing. It requires a certain amount of, well, what is given in formal education: being able to read, to write, being able to communicate. Those things are important, but they are not the be all and end all. Being able to be productive on your own, to set up
Okay,
something.
I
Yeah.
have a question there for Omowale Ogunrinde. Now,
Okay.
you started your Fields of Skills and Dreams in 2003. Has there been a point where you've been able to have discussions with parents? You see a lot of people sending their kids to schools that are charging 1.5 million, 2 million per annum, or 2 million per term, that kind of stuff. Has there been a point where you looked at it and said, you know what, these expensive schools, what quality of education do they truly give these children against the future, as against the present? Even at which the present, it doesn't truly fit in. Have you been able to, have interactions with schools, with parents on introducing vocational education to those schools, even if it was a case of lessons, as we call it, extracurricular lessons? Has that been possible? Hello, Amawai?
I think she's frozen again.
Yeah, I think we lost her there. So Abiola, will that work at any point in time? Introducing, or having discussions with parents. You worked in Corona schools in
Okay.
Lagos before you went to the UK.
Yes. I did. I worked in private schools in Nigeria, just like Corona, St. Koi, and so on. The thing about it is,
Yes.
there are actually there are opportunities to introduce children to the idea.
Okay.
If for children who are, for example, in the brownies or the scouts, as we used to have it, there would be probably the opportunity to sell something. There's that opportunity, but people need to take it. People need to recognize the value of it and to push it more. In short, I think that in Nigeria, you see, like the entrepreneurship curriculum that we had, which by the way was later scrapped in the UK,
Okay.
but it was
Okay.
scrapped because there was a review of the curriculum again. Was it 2003, where we then had what they called the creative curriculum. And what we did at that time was you taught all sorts of things that were linked. But then, of course, we'd already gone down the route of practical education anyway, of incorporating
Yes.
practicals into all topics, put it like that. So I guess then they probably thought that that bit was not necessary, though I still, for any teacher who wished it, they could have carried on with it. But it was no longer, the school no longer gave the money to the classes and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's the opportunity, but it requires the teachers, as Omowale had said earlier, it requires the teachers to value what experiences that are outside the strict the old idea of formal education, what those could do to for the children, and
Yeah.
therefore try and incorporate those. And the children are never too young for that.
They're never too young, because I mean, if you look at the likes of China, if you look at Turkey, they both have something in common. And what they have in common is the fact that their economies are driven by vocations. Their economies are driven by vocations. This is an opportunity for Africa. When you look at what has happened in terms of the COVID-19, we don't develop or we don't produce anything. Nothing. But surprisingly, we saw a country like Senegal. Senegal was even able to come up with test kits, and they were exporting. They were able to do that. How were they able to do that successfully? Why is a country like Nigeria, that has such a large pool of human resources, has the finance, not able to do these things successfully? We don't even have what you call all these industrial zones. We don't have them. Why do we have this? Why do we have this massive gap?
Yeah, I know you're going to bring in Omowale there, but let me just say
Yes.
first that back again to the foundation of all this, as part of the Commonwealth, what we were supposed to be doing was to be consuming what was produced in the UK. So, for example, I don't know, I mean, you know, you are younger than me. In my time, you had all this thing of made in Britain until people
Yes.
became wiser to China. All
Oh
we
yeah.
were there for was to be giving our money. So they took our oil. Our oil was taken abroad to refine and brought back to us. Even within the country, we did not have a refinery. We
I agree.
produced
I
little.
totally agree with you. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, you know, my father's time, you know, it was, what I noticed was most of them went to go and get the golden fleece, came back to Nigeria. When they were coming back, they came with goods that were made in Britain and set up shops or assembly plants, more or less, but they were not producing anything.
Because of the
Nothing.
mentality, it was to link our economy in, and as when we became independent, we could have kept our raw materials and done our own thing, but we didn't know how to use them. So our raw materials were made to be exported. And our education system was made to stop us from being wise.
Let me go back to Omowale with that initial question that I had. So I was saying that, you know, you started in 2003. There are loads of schools, especially private schools all over Nigeria, that are charging 1.5 million, 2 million, that kind of thing, with very, very poor quality of education. Now, have you ever had, you know, the opportunity to interact with either the schools or the parents of children in those schools and say, look, you know what? Your child doesn't need just formal education. They also need a blend of vocational education. Have you ever had that opportunity?
Yes, and it's a continuous discussion. I think Abiola
Okay.
mentioned something about value. The question we should ask ourselves is, what value do parents or what value do Nigerians place on vocational education for their children? And the only time they place that value, or they think they want to place a value, is when their children have jobs. You know, and so you find some of the children even traveling abroad, spending so much money on a good education, coming back home, and they are not able to get jobs. And then their parents would say, why don't you go and acquire a skill? What would you like to do? So
It's always
this
an afterthought.
afterthought, and it's so cheap. You're talking about the millions you spend to acquire a worthless certificate. So we are not even saying don't allow your children, because I always emphasize that what we need is a blend. You must have the formal education. There are certain skills and attitudes and things that changes about you, but there should be a blend. Let people understand. When I started vocational training, I started to read a lot of books on the why behind something. So
Yes.
you are learning a skill and you don't even understand the reason why you're doing this thing. Like Bella said, the titration and all of that we were learning in the chemistry labs in those days, we didn't know why. We didn't know what it could produce. We didn't know what the results could be,
Oh,
and
yes.
you have all said it. The colonial masters made us shopkeepers, made us consumers that we are not able to produce what we are going to consume. But you realize
If,
that those who go in the way of entrepreneurship in this country and they do it professionally, they excel and they make
they
a
do.
lot of money. So why are
They
we
do.
not blending this right into our educational system so that as the students are graduating, they are able to decide, what exactly do I want to do with my life? Most of our graduates don't know and it's not just about now. As far back as 20, 30, 40 years ago, they just graduate from school and the next thing is write an application for an employment somewhere, become an office clerk or a management trainee or something like that. And then when they cannot get that job, they say they are jobless. But there are better opportunities. But you only spend money on what you place value on. So some of
Oh,
the
yes.
schools, we even got to a stage where we were inviting secondary schools to bring their students to our center on a one-day excursion, and we would do like 1 or 2 hours of vocational demonstration for them, let them try their hands on the sewing machine, go to the electrical lab, go to the phone repair section, and do all of that. Some of the schools will still say no. And then after, okay, let's come into your schools, let's teach, just a way of incorporating this. Some of them will tell you, oh, we already have teachers who are teaching them those things. We already have people. So there is no value placed
There's no value.
on it.
Why do you think? Why do you think they were saying no to you wanting to, show them the value behind vocational education?
Education in Nigeria, for most stakeholders, is a business. So for some schools that are very open with us, they will say, we cannot ask our parents to pay for that, willing to remove that from what they have paid us. So if the parents are willing to pay, there's a school that we go to for summer classes. We give them 3 weeks of vocational training, and
Yes.
less than 10% of the students in that school come for those classes because the school advertises it separately from their summer school. And so it is only parents who are discerning, and less than 10%. And even the school doesn't emphasize it. They think it's like they're doing us a favor by even allowing us to come in to teach. But then, what happens to all these children after high school? Some cannot even get in through JAM. Their parents cannot raise the funds to send them abroad. And so they're at home for like 2 or 3 years trying to get into university. And you know what happens when a teenager is idle. So there's so much that is involved in the poor quality education that educational system that we are currently running. The children or the youths are not brought up to be able to become self-independent. They are not. They cannot be engaged. They cannot be employed. they can, so we do a lot of talking about these things, but there is not much action being put in.
There's a high level. There's a high level of unemployable youths in Nigeria. And Abiola, can we term teaching as a vocation?
Can we what?
Can we term teaching as a vocation?
It is a vocation.
It is a vocation.
So yes. if that you have the quality. Sorry, I think we've lost her there. I said if we have the quality of education that you had the opportunities that you had, why as far back as then did you decide to go for the vocational career more like?
For me as a
person? I'll be honest with you, my degree is in chemistry. I have a degree in chemistry. I have a BSc honors in chemistry. Yes. So I had to take permission. I came back. I worked in a company in the Caribbean doing as a chemist. Then I came back to Nigeria and I did youth corps with a pharmaceutical company that was not producing any pharmaceuticals. Pardon?
I'm just like, of course we know that we're not producing anything. We tell you that they're a pharmaceutical company, but they weren't producing.
The whole idea of the owner of the pharmaceutical company, who was based in America, was simply to send us powders to compress into tabs. So we weren't going to be producing any medication. But anyway, in my youth corps year, we didn't produce anything. I left youth corps, came back to Lagos because I did my youth corps in Jos, came back to Lagos, and I was home. It was about six months when my aunt came and said, "Will I be a math? That she knows I'm good at math. Will I come and teach maths at her school?" And I said yes. Her condition was that I should not abandon the children before the end of the school year. But within 3 weeks, I knew that was what I wanted to do, and then I registered at Unilag for a PGDE. I always mix it up. It's PGCE here, PGDE there, and that's how I got into teaching. But before that, I remember when I was at Queen's School in Ibadan, and we did tie-dye in art.
Yeah, tie and dye.
Tie and dye. And then of course at home, although I wasn't selling anything, but we baked. I grew up doing those things, arranging flowers, baking, things like that. So and if I needed anything, I would think first of all of how I could do it. I loved embroidery. That was a skill, something that we learned in school. And when one was, and of course I loved art as well, but art was something that I wasn't allowed to do for O levels because my father wanted me to do additional maths, and it clashed, so I couldn't do that. Yes. But anyway, to cut a long story short, when I was in Trinidad and working as a chemist in a company, I realized there was something called the craft market, and this craft market used to come up every so often, and I thought to myself, what can I produce? I looked around me and I decided to do tie-dye. I was using old Dylon dyes, and I didn't know about the professional dyes.
Okay.
I learned about the professional dyes from other people who were dyeing, who were using dyes. That's how I learned, and they actually didn't want to tell me much about it because my style, but I guess because I was authentic from Nigeria and I had learned it and I had grown up seeing tie-dye, and because I had had that little bit of exposure, I used to think, how is this done? How did they do this? And that in itself made links in my brain. And this is what you see. So a little bit of exposure allows you, my point is that a little bit of exposure allows you to have a base on which you can build for later. So alongside my job, I was doing tie-dye, which I used to go on Saturdays to the craft market to sell. When I became a teacher in Nigeria, I wasn't doing tie-dye because there was tie-dye. But I remember getting into baking. For some time, I did baking. There was a time when all of a sudden scrunchies came out. And there were scrunchies everywhere. And it was end of term. I just went to my mother's sewing box and dragged out all the pieces of cloth. And looking at a scrunchie, I could tell how it was made. I would just make scrunchies in the night, maybe about 15. Take them to work. The teachers would rush these scrunchies. It was amazing that they couldn't look at it and think of the last piece of rectangular cloth. gave you a
talking about tie and dye, I have let me ask Omowale this. The fashion industry, the African fashion industry is already worth well over $20 billion. By the year 2027, 2028 is reported it's going to be worth about $41 billion. Now, people wear the African fabric all over the world, but there's not one manufacturer in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, I think the only manufacturer in Africa is in Senegal, and the one in Senegal is not even a case of they do the products from start to finish. It is just a case of they refine the products, repackage the products in Africa, and then distribute.
Actually, there are manufacturers in Nigeria. I think the problem is that abroad and for the big brands, they will not want to put the Nigerian label on those.
Really?
Fabrics. That's it. But most of the fabric come from Nigeria. And
you have manufacturers of Ankara in Nigeria.
The Ankara,
not
Ankara, we've moved out of Ankara. Ankara is now a China thing. But manufacturers,
but we used to have
Adire, they are
Yes, Adire.
The back.
Yes.
The handmade ones. And you won't even believe how pricey they are because of the
Yes, they are very expensive.
Yes, they are very expensive now. The Ankara market died. But then when you look at it, the Ankara is not actually, I wouldn't say it's our native, because even in those days that all those manufacturing industries were doing great business here, they were not they were not totally indigenous textile factories, even though they were here. But then the technology behind the tie and dye and the batik is still a bit crude. And maybe I would say we're lucky that the Chinese don't yet have that clear understanding of how we go through using the candle and all of that. But
I've seen some of them in Abeokuta. I've seen them around that the Polytechnic, the Abiola Polytechnic. I've seen some Chinese people there, interacting and all that.
Interacting and trying. And so if it is also not something that if they don't get the government support to scale up and to become very big, it is something also that you'll just find that other countries will be producing. And that is the problem we have had with a lot of those grassroots skills. I'm sure for those of you who live abroad, you know that our local kilishi is now packaged abroad and and produced by foreigners and all of that. And meanwhile, it is indigenous to Nigeria, and the poor people who do it, they are still fanning it and blowing it and doing all of that. But then there is a way you need to scale up. A lot of the things we're doing, we're still doing it the way it used to be. And things have moved up. Education has changed. The service industry has changed. Everything has. And that is why you find a young Nigerian coming up with a fantastic idea in the service industry. And before you know it, you hear that his address has changed. Another startup has pay him so much money for his idea, and they've taken him somewhere in California or somewhere like that. And that's because you don't really have the backup to scale up. So you have the good ideas, you know that there's a better way of doing this thing, but truly, it's not everything that you can do on your own to get to that level that you're able to have a big market somewhere in the world. But for the Adire, I think as at now, they seem to be doing well, but not well enough, because I know that very soon, if we are not careful, it's going to be taken out of the hands of Nigeria.
So how can we create a synergy between the formal education and the vocational education at the young stages, as in that 5 to 15-year-old age range, and get some private capital into that sector and try to build on it? How can we do that?
We need a blend, that's all. And I always say that for a lot of corporate organizations in Nigeria, they don't understand that the best thing to do with your corporate social responsibility is to invest in education, because a good education is to the benefit of everybody.
Yes.
Thousands of millions of Nigerians who even hitherto had been employed pre-COVID have suddenly become unemployed post-COVID.
Unemployed.
Unemployed. And what are they going to do? But if they had the right quality education that made them useful to themselves and useful to the community, they probably would not be so many that are unemployed and idle. So we need a private-public sector partnership to ensure that right from the primary school, the educational system is geared towards, everybody talks about Bill Gates and says, oh, he didn't go to university, he didn't go to whatever. He did not have to go to university to succeed and to excel. When you
That's a
study
fact,
in
yeah.
yes, when you go to high school abroad, you don't, going to university is not like the necessary next step, because there are so many other options. I have a friend in the UK, one of her daughters, she has two daughters. One is a lawyer and the other one is a fashion designer. The fashion designer makes much more money than the lawyer, but
Oh yeah.
here, yes, and the fashion designer did not, she went to a VTech school. So, but here in Nigeria, it's like the only option you have is to wait for JAM for the next 3 or 4 years, get in through JAM, just study any available course, and then after that, you suddenly realize that you don't have what it takes to get yourself a job. But if right from secondary school, you have the basic education that can help you take the right decision, going to university will probably even be a part-time thing. I have a young guy who was rusticated from university, and he became a problem to his parents. And he came to learn furniture craft with us. And
Yes.
in less than 6 months, he was making money. And after about 2 or 3 years of doing well in the furniture craft business, he decided to go back to University of Lagos part-time. And he said he just decided to do that so that he would say he also has a university degree. But that most of his own students and apprentices were actually unemployed graduates who did not know their left from right. So
Oh
we
yeah.
need to begin to see that vocational training is not for school dropouts, but then we also need to begin to put a blend of it right from primary school, teach our young ones how to be independent, how to be able to take a useful decision that I want to work for myself, even if I want to work for somebody else, this is what I want to bring to the table. We need to understand those things. Those things are not taught. So we're just going through the motions of going to school and graduating and then suddenly finding yourself jobless. Some of our youths or graduates will go to an interview and they ask them, what are you going to bring to the table, or what are you going to be able to contribute to this organization? They don't even know. And they say,
They have no idea. Oh yes.
they have no idea.
They have
They
no
don't
idea.
even know. If they ask them, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? They have no idea. So what kind of education does that person have?
For Abiola,
Yes.
one of the most successful educational systems I have seen in the world is the Igbo apprenticeship system.
Yeah.
The Igbo man
Yeah.
the Igbo man that sells, whatever. The most popular ones are the spare parts shops owners. They take a young child, 9, 10, that age range, and they train him to a certain age, and then they set up his own shop for him, and then he's free to set up his own business. Now, that can be modeled into a modern system that can be introduced into our educational system in Nigeria. What type of policies? What type of policy structures do you think, or restructuring do you think we need in the formal sector to be able to introduce that type of, educational system?
As I was listening to Omowale earlier, what came to my mind, all of a sudden I heard this line from one of Bob Marley's songs: emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
From mental slavery.
None of ourselves can, yeah. Because you see, as I said earlier, our education system has been based upon providing our colonial masters with what they needed. And then we also had the system where we then just took it and it's just passing that, it's like passing the baton on without actually examining whether that baton is cracked, whether it needs replacement before the next race or what. So in the formal education system can include vocational training, can include vocational education, but it requires us to examine our curriculum and write it so that it provides for what we need. We need to, in Nigeria, I'm saying now, and all
yes.
economies, all countries need to always be thinking ahead. What is the economy going to be like? What do we need? And we need to plan in advance. I say to children, like in the UK, where people are saying, "Oh, why are you doing exams?" I like exams because what happens is the government is actually looking to see, in the case of exams in the UK, is who will make the grade to go to university in the end, so that those provisions can be put into place, right? So basically, we need to plan in advance. We need to have a review of our curriculum. And one of the things that we could do, which may be a few years behind where Britain was, but then, as I said, they dropped it, is introduce some sort of aspect of vocational education each year. Do you know, for example, here I'm wearing some jewelry that I made. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I make it, and people who know I make jewelry ask me from time to time, "What do you have?" And I show them, but it relaxes me. If I come home from a stressful day, no matter how tense I am, if I make jewelry, it relaxes me, you know. So this is something that, but do you know that this is something that 5-year-olds can do? Well, not using the metal, but
not using sophisticated metals, yes, or stringing methods, yes.
In the maths curriculum for 4 and 5-year-olds in the United Kingdom, you have pattern making, and you give the children beads. You see it with even in a 3-year-old classroom, you have a box of beads, circular ones, square ones, rectangular ones, triangular ones, and they have these shoelaces. And then you tell the children to make a pattern, or you show them a pattern and tell them to continue the pattern. And then that determines what beads they pick and add to the pattern. If you give a child a piece of elastic and you give them beads, eventually they will begin to think of how they can combine it. Their sense of aesthetics within will come out. Giving that, so if you can give that to 5-year-olds, they begin to think that, "Oh, I can make a bangle." Maybe eventually that will interest them to make other things.
But yes, definitely.
Developing them in another, developing a side of their intelligence as well. Everything we do means, as children anyway, growing up, everything they do, and even as adults, we fire new neurons. There's a thing about, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can.
New tricks. You can.
If you incentivize that dog enough, you can teach it new
tricks. Most definitely, yes.
So
a friend of mine has a 10-year-old son. That his 10-year-old son can build a website in 20 minutes flat.
Wow.
I'm sure he's watching this as well, you know, but it was just a case of, he is the one that looked at his child and said, "You know what, you have to be able to do something for yourself." At just 10 years old, the boy can actually build a website in 20 minutes using a website builder. Not necessarily a case of he has to code. So now I can't believe that we've spent an hour and we didn't even take a break, as that's how interesting this topic is. And I believe a lot of Nigerians need to consistently hear things like this so that they can look at their children and say, "Look, you know what, we need to be able to move from where we are to where we want to be." And it is a blend of formal and vocational education that can take us in that direction. I'd like to thank both of you, Abiola, Raimi, Omowale, Ogunrinde, and I hope we can have both of you on sometime soon again. And we'll continue this conversation another time. Have a great evening. Thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you. Yeah, bye. Bye. Have a great evening. So there you have it. It's been a long conversation, unbroken. We didn't even have a break. That's amazing, and that's how interesting it is, you know, to discuss education. we all have to start looking at ourselves and ask ourselves several questions all over again. What type of education do we have? What type of education are we giving our children? In order for us to be able to develop as a people, to be able to contribute our own quota, have self-dignity, self-respect, you need to be able to produce. Now, sometimes when I do something, especially with my hands, if it's gardening, if it's painting, whatever it is, I get a certain sense of fulfillment from it. And I think that every single human being, would have that experience if you do stuff, which people do every single blessed day. People are always doing stuff. So why can't you just look at yourself, translate that thing into something else? It is not about what you do, it is about how you do it. There are people who started out as plumbers and they own plumbing companies today. There are people who started out as those same plumbers and they are actually manufacturers of plumbing materials. You have people who are PhDs who actually own, cabinetry making businesses. It's all about perception. Once you are able to sustainably mix formal education and vocational education, there's no stopping you. The sky is not even the limit. It's been great, being on the show and having those two great guests. COVID-19 is still real. It is still out there. We can see from the signs, or the stats that are coming out from the United States where there have been demonstrations, based on the Black Lives Matter, how there has been a massive spike in the amount of people that have been infected with the COVID-19 virus. It's much, much safer for you to stay safe, keep a social distance, wear a mask if you must go into an environment where there are other people. If you go to the fromaradio.com website, scroll down to the bottom left, you will see a red button with the help on it. Click on it. It's a COVID-19 tracker, so it's a pop-up. Go through it. It doesn't take any of your information, doesn't take anything from you. It only just helps you to keep track of how you feel at this particular point in time. Now, please take notes. It's being used all over the world. There's nothing fantastic. There's nothing new. There's nothing out of the world about it. So it's been proven, to work. It's been proven to assist you and assist everybody that uses it. So you can just use it to track your daily, the way you feel on a daily basis to know if you need to quickly see a doctor, if you need to self-isolate. But please take better care of yourself. Stay safe out there. And on the issue of rape, we are screaming it, we are shouting it, say no to rape. It's a pandemic in Africa, especially Nigeria and South Africa. We need to start treating our women better. We need to treat our women as goddesses because that's what they are, so that we can build strong nations. Without a strong woman, you don't have a strong nation. So I wish you all a fantastic week ahead. See you on Thursday for our next great guest. You all have a great and fantastic evening. Thank you very much.